Good afternoon, ladies and gents. I didn't speak at all during my filming inside, and it was filmed in portrait rather than landscape, I'm afraid, so like it or not, that's what you got. But we're at the Church of Barking, St Margaret's of Antioch in Barking, which was once Essex, now inner London. I've done this one before, but it's tribute to the Queen inside with some lovely music being played. Anyway, we're going to visit a little bit of my history today. Samuel Maywood and Joanna Maywood. They originally had one of these tall types of stones like the ones you're looking at there, but as you can see in this bit of the churchyard, there are no or very few stones, and that is because directly over there is the river, and that was warehouses and whatnot in the wartime, and it received a direct hit, thereby all the shrapnel and mostly guttering from what the church records say destroyed nearly every gravestone that was at the back here, including my ancestors. Now, my ancestor Samuel Maywood was a Quaker, and so was his wife. Anyway, 1808, 1809, there was a nasty cholera epidemic, not one of the severe bad ones, but that was going on in London. Samuel Maywood, who was known as Mr Samuel Maywood because he had a trade, he was a plumber glazier and lived in Plaistow Village, where a lot of people were running away from the cholera. Samuel and other men of the Quaker Brotherhood, they went into the danger to help people with Quaker women and stuff as well. Anyway, he got the cholera himself and ended up dying. They managed to get him home because the Quakers kept pretty good records. His wife, and this was in the winter 1809, his wife and his daughter and one of the men of the Quaker house went on what was called a sledge cart from Plaistow to Mile End to get him, brought him home, and he died in his own bed several hours later. As a Quaker, he could have been buried in the Quaker burial ground, but Samuel's a bit of an interesting man. He came from a part Quaker, part Church of England family, and appears to have left wishes or instructions that he wished to be buried near his mother, who was Church of England. Samuel's father is also Samuel, and he was buried in the Quaker burial ground. So yeah, Samuel obviously was very close to his mother. Interesting thing is, for about 10 years, I went on believing that this man and this lady were my 4 times great-grandparents. No, sorry, 5 times great-grandparents. But it actually turns out that they're not. Samuel's brother Charles is and his wife Susanna are my 4 times great-grandparents. So that was a little family history mystery solved. But yeah, that's just a little piece of my history. They came from Plaistow when it was a nice little village in the countryside. It had a windmill and a little stream running through it. Samuel, he died, I think he was aged... Oh, I can't work it out, but yeah, he was in his 50s. I'm not good at maths. And his wife Joanna would live to be a very old woman. And I read an article about her in a Quaker Gazette newspaper that said basically she lived into her old age, but she became in her mind as a child as she got older, so it sounds like she had something like dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. But it said there that she remained ever merry and blessing of God all her life in the article. So she was obviously a very religious woman, and they did some good as well. So as Quakers, they didn't have wills or anything like that. The records are quite difficult to get hold of or read unless you know Quakers, which I don't. It was only per chance that I wrote to the Quaker house at Wanstead asking if they knew anything about the Maywood family and Samuel Maywood in particular, and because they knew of what he'd done and how he'd died, they'd been searching for his burial for quite some time, thinking that as a Quaker he would have been buried in a Quaker burial ground, but he wasn't. So I was able to help them with the information that he's buried here. They was able to help me with information, and between the lot of us we raised the money and got this stone made. It got broke a few years ago. I don't know whether it was vandalised or an accident, but lovely people in the church all put together and had it repaired. So yeah, this is only just going to be a little 5-minute short. That's a little bit of my history, and because this has got a really good burial map, this churchyard. Monumental inscriptions book. Loads and loads of churches and churchyards started doing them in the 30s. About 1932 this one was done, and basically the sextons or church wardens went round and they described every gravestone that was remaining, whatever inscription that was on it remaining. So that's how we got a good description of Samuel's gravestone, and it was 6 foot tall with a footstone, and it started off sacred to the memory of Mr. Samuel Maywood of Plaistow. A person called Mr. in those days meant that they had a trade. They weren't an employee, they was an employer, basically. He had a free trade. But yeah, a few little snippets. I've found a couple of bits of Samuel Maywood in the National Archives. One was he was asked to go and inspect the West Ham Borough Workhouse once, along with other Quaker people, and their report was not pleasant. And they wrote basically that in a Christian society no human being should ever be treated so. He was offered the mastership of the workhouse but turned it down because they weren't going to change their rules and start being nice to workhouses, so I don't think Mr. Maywood here wanted any part of that. But yeah, another thing is that someone refused to pay him once, so he took them to court. He got his money, £9, 7 shillings and 11 pence and a halfpenny. So that was a fair sum in those days. It was for guttering and window work they had done, because he was a plumber glazier, and unfortunately in those days being a plumber meant he would have come into contact with dead bodies quite a lot, the ones of the upper classes that had to be buried in lead coffins, because it was the plumber's job to do that. So that could have been possibly where he caught the cholera, so that's a little mystery. We'll never know that one. But he died in the winter of 1809 when it was very, very icy and very, very snowy. And bearing in mind in those days the Barking Road didn't exist, so they would have had to go all the way from Plaistow to Ilford along the Romford Road, and then from Ilford to Barking along the country tracks, and somehow got him and his family here, and here he's buried with his wife. Their grandson is also buried with them as well, but we found that out after this stone was made. But yeah, there we are. That's a little wander down my family history. It's a nice church, if you can hear the bird song, which I suppose you can unless you're Mutt and Jeff. The church tower is going to be scaffolding on it soon and being repaired, as it is in a sorry state inside. I've helped with what I can with donations and things like that, and advertising, fundraisers and stuff, and they got a grant from the lottery as well, so, and one of the rich parishioners that's here nowadays done it old school, and they donated a load of money to it, so the work will begin soon. Looks fairly alright from the outside, but it's the lead and the woodwork on the inside. Right, here we are, guys and girls. This was a little bit of history of the church, and as I was going to say, Samuel's mother is buried on this side with 2 of Samuel's infant brothers, and on this side are my actual 4 times great grandparents, as Samuel's brother and sister-in-law, William Maywood and Martha Maywood. William Maywood was an eel fisherman, and his wife of his was an eel wife. She died in an accident, or in the burial record it says died by accident, which intrigued me when I first discovered that one, so a lot of toing and froing getting the coroner's records. Turns out that she was either doing washing in the river or doing something with eel baskets in the river, wearing a big woolen skirt as women did in those days, slipped in, and the weight of the woolen skirt pulled her in, and she was swept down river a few miles and drowned and brought back here anyway. And she was only 41, and her husband never married again, and he died at the age of 72. Alright, okay everyone, hope you all found that interesting. As I say, sorry about having to film portrait inside and not landscape, but here we are. Right, take care all, see you all soon.